welcome to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm your host, Christy Keating. In this podcast, we talk about it all, our parenting, our partnering, and our professional lives, because they are all a part of us, and we were never meant to do this alone. Welcome back to the Heartful Parent Podcast. I'm really excited for you to hear today's interview because last week we dug into the new report from the CDC, the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, that, as you heard from last week's episode, was pretty discouraging, depressing, frustrating, scary for many of us as parents. And for any of you who know me at all, you know I don't love to parent or encourage others to parent from a place of fear and stress and anxiety. I don't think that serves us. And so while it was important to talk about what this report said, now I want to start digging into what do we do about it? How do we empower ourselves as parents? And, what are the causes and what are the fixes? And that's what this week's episode is all about. I'm really excited to introduce you to Sherra Grasser. Sherra Grasser is the owner of MePowerment. She is a youth empowerment coach and really works on empowering our youth from the inside out. She works directly with tweens and teens, and her mission is to make an impact and advocate for the mental health and well-being of our youth. Sherra recognizes that our youth are growing up disconnected in a super connected world, and that they are bombarded by outside influences, including social media, peers, parents, and more. And so youth empowerment coaching really offers a space to those tweens and teens for human connection, difficult conversations, and to nurture one's authentic self. Full disclosure, my teen works with Sherra. She's amazing. She does incredible work with our youth, and that's why I knew when we were digging into this new report from the CDC that we needed to have Sherra. So if you don't know about the report and what it says and the significance of it and the meaning of it, I suggest you pause here, go back to last week's episode and take a quick listen to what this report means. It's a solo episode, just me, and I kind of break down what did the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, look at, and what did they find out about the mental health and physical well-being of our kids. And then come back to this fantastic interview with Sherra as we talk about what can we do about it. So without further ado, Sherra Grasser. Welcome, Sherra. I am so excited to have you here. Thank you for being on the Heartful Parent Podcast.
Thank you. I'm ready. This is good.
I'm excited. And I'm not that excited about what we're going to talk about because, as listeners heard me say in the intro here, we're going to dig into some stuff that feels really discouraging to parents. And when this CDC report first came out, I thought, A, I got to talk about this. Parents need to know. And B, Sherra, we got to have Sherra talk about this because you work with teens directly. I dug into all the specifics of the CDC report last week. And this week, I really want to start talking about what do we do? So I want to start with this question. You've read the report. I know you and I have talked about it off air. What do you see as some of the biggest causes for the trends that we are seeing in the overall well-being, mental health of our teen youth, of our high school students right now?
So I think there's a lot in this, a lot. That's a loaded question, right? But everything is going to be loaded around this conversation. I mean, really, it's going, and I just want to also almost make it clear, like, I am not blaming anybody. Everybody is doing the best they can. I mean, this is a huge conversation without blame.
Yes.
What I know and what I'm hearing because of what the kids tell me is, I will tell you, I can break it down to the root cause, which I will tell you is disconnection. Why are we in such a disconnected space? Well, social media, access to the internet, so easy. Okay. So it's not even just social media, it's the internet. Then we have COVID. COVID took us out of what we knew. It closed our schools. It put parents working at home. And then we have all the factors that come with families and economical and all of that. And then we also have move into that economical and that place of what parents doing the best they can in a time that can be super struggling financially, and working both jobs or two jobs, and kids having a little more freedom, home alone more. And then let's pull isolation in. When COVID hit, and then with parents having to do more, we have kids that are spending a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
So I would say between COVID, isolation, social media, and the strain on our parents or big people, I'd say those are probably my top 4 factors that are leading to this disconnection, which is leading to the stats that we were just given.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we definitely saw it. Let's be honest. The stats and the trends were not, for the most part, great before COVID, but they certainly got worse. What this report seems to pretty clearly indicate is that almost every avenue that we were measuring, almost every factor that was being measured got worse for our kids. And in particular, it got worse for girls, and it got worse for our LGBTQ plus kids. Like, that seemed to be a really big overarching trend. Okay, so you talked about disconnection as like the big overarching kind of umbrella cause here. And I want to dig into at least a few of those specific factors that are leading to the disconnection. You mentioned social media and the internet in general. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the impact that is having on this sense of disconnection, and how that is then translating into the trends that we are seeing?
Yes. And I want to just share, Christy, that when I say disconnection, every human being is wired to feel seen. And not just be seen, because we can be seen on social media, right? We can be seen, but to feel seen is very different. And when we lack that feeling of being seen, being heard, that's when we have that disconnect. So for anyone that's listening and is like, what is this disconnection? I mean, my kid's connected to Wi-Fi or, goes to school every day and they have friends. Yes. And there still can be a lack of feeling seen.
I think that is such an important distinction that you just made. The difference between being seen and feeling seen.
Which is a great segue, though, into the social media conversation. I'm seeing the kids, and again, I have to go back to the kids that I work with. That's where my experiences come from. My 2 kids are young adults. They're also having experiences on social media as well. Let's leave it at that. They really are. And social media what I'm noticing is our youth are getting access to social media at a lot younger age than they are developmentally ready for it. So emotionally, physically, mentally, all of it. I think we all know that. I think that's a given. And if you say, my kid doesn't have social media, I'm going to be here to tell you they just might, because they have a friend who has it. So they get access through the friend or the friend's phone, or they have a profile and you just don't know about it because they don't have the app on their phone. These kids are smart. Like, do not be fooled. Kids are smart. And most of our kids have access to a school computer, which is another way during free time or breaks or whatever. There is a way that they have figured out a lot of times how to go beyond and get into what they need in that moment.
Yes. Yes. And as a parent who tries to sort of monitor and manage what my child has access to, that school computer is like the bane of my existence. I really hate it. I hate it. And, I think I so appreciate what you are saying about social media, that they're getting on it before they're developmentally ready. And I think it's really interesting that under COPPA, which is the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, which is a federal law, children are supposed to be 13 or older to be on social media. And the U.S. Surgeon General just came out in the last couple of weeks and said, kids really shouldn't be on it until at least age 14, and maybe even older than that. And yet you and I know that kids are getting on it before 13 in many, many cases.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, there is so much good in social media. There is the good. And I want to say that because there are some really great people to follow. There are some really great reasons to be there. And if you're not at the maturity to know and focus on that, as well as self-confidence and all the other things that our youth are building, right? And that time, it's easy to get caught up in what's not good, where the drama is. It's a lot of comparison. I mean, there are filters. Everybody looks beautiful, or everybody is depressed, and this is just the normal way and the things how to be now. So it depends on where the kiddo gets in and where they feel like they belong. And then that seems to take a turn in how they start showing up. Yeah. They're not good enough. I'll never compare. They get to do everything. I never get to do any of this. I can't wear makeup yet. She's 12. She's beautiful. I'm never going to look like that. Or there's I'm just depressed. Everybody my age is depressed. I follow X, Y, and Z on TikTok, and this is the conversation they're always having. It's just normal for my age. Really?
That
makes me sad.
Yeah, it makes me really sad too. And I have a 13-year-old who is in the thick of all of this, right? She starts high school next year. And I have certainly seen some of these challenges come up with her and her friend group. So I want to actually ask a few more questions about that sort of mental health piece, because there is the very real disconnection that you talked about that is happening, right? Very real disconnection that is leading to very real mental health challenges. And this report from the CDC says that overall, and I dug into this a bit last week, but we've got 42% of high school students report feeling or having experienced persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness over at least a 2-week period, which is sort of the indication for depression, right? And it goes even further to say, like, when we parse that out a bit, that it's 60% of girls who are feeling that. That is nearly 2/3 of our girls who are feeling persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness.
And I think one of the stats that was alarming to me to see in print was 1 in 3 girls have considered suicide.
That was horrifying to me.
Yeah.
And an incredibly high number of them haven't just considered it, but have actually made a suicide plan.
Attempt. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or attempts. Yeah.
Or attempt.
I mean, and if we were just talking about it, like I would probably be like, yeah, I can see that. I know that. But to sit down at a table and see that statistic, it felt like a slap in the face to see it in print.
Yeah, it felt like that for me too when I first read it. And when I heard that this report had been released. And so what I'm trying to reconcile, because you talked about like our youth are definitely talking about mental health more. They're having those conversations. It does appear to be sort of more of a topic. And so you're saying, like, I heard you say that there are some kids who are saying, I'm depressed because that's kind of part of the culture. How do we parse out, like, this is just I hate to say cool thing to say, but like, this is just what teens say and what the reality is, because what I'm seeing is really high numbers reporting it, but then also that's translating to an increase in actual suicidal ideation and planning. That doesn't feel fake to me. So how do we, right? So how do we figure out what's going on with our kids as a whole? And for those parents who are like, how do I tell if this is real and dangerous for my child? Like, where's that line?
Oh my God. If we could solve that, that's like the $1 million question, Christy.
I know.
Right?
I know.
However, it is. And I feel like I want to answer this from both a coach in the youth space, but also as a parent. I have a son who is clinically diagnosed with PTSD, depression, anxiety. I have been a caregiver for many years for him and his mental health. So it's a lot. And how do we know what is just they're falling into a place where they feel like they belong because they feel sad or they do get worried? And how do we differentiate between it's just that versus we have a clinical diagnosis? Like there is an underlying something that needs to be further, investigated or looked at. The one thing, and Christy, you could probably speak to this more, but this is coming from the mom space in me. The one thing I will tell every parent or caregiver is never doubt your gut. Trust your freaking gut.
Yeah.
And check in with it often. Because if it is a constant nag of concern or worry for your child, then there needs to be a bigger conversation and you need to build that team of people to support you, the people that know.
Yeah.
So whether that's getting in first with your family doctor, pediatrician, moving into, counseling, or even someone that can help you dive a little deeper into this. If it's that feeling of this is just the space they're in, it's who they're surrounding themselves with. If it's that doesn't mean let it go.
I was going to say, that still strikes me as not healthy.
It's not. And it's easy as a parent in our world, and we're busy. And I'm right there with everybody else that is like, oh my God, when do I make time for that? I'm telling you, it is time to have a conversation. It has to start with some communication between you and your kiddo. And just opening that conversation. Tell me about this. Tell me what it feels like. Where do you feel it in your body? Like, just get them talking about that. I mean, that's a lot of what I do too, because I don't know is the number one answer for everything. I don't
Yes.
know. I don't remember. I don't know. And sometimes it's true. They don't know. Other times it's because they're really uncomfortable and they don't want to talk about it because it's not a big deal. However, it is a big deal to us parents.
Well, and it's a big deal when we see what the actual trends are, right? This isn't something that we should, any of us, whether we're talking about a clinical diagnosis or not, the fact that our youth are in a place where they are feeling sad or feel like feeling sad is a method of connection. That is a big deal.
Yeah.
That's a real big deal.
Yeah. And feeling sad is just that. Feeling sad is an emotion. It's there to teach us something. It's not a bad emotion. I often will sit with kids and we do emotion identification, and I'll being able to name things because they don't know, right?
Right.
Is what they say. I don't know. And so I do this whole piece of work and then they're like, well, I'll tell you, these are my good emotions and these are bad feelings. And I'm like, bad feelings. I was raised in that manner.
Yeah. I think most of us
good
were.
or bad. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
thought, well, crap, feelings aren't good or bad. Feelings are just that. They're feelings. They're there to teach us something. You're afraid? Well, it's because it's trying to tell you something about that in that moment. You're sad? It's because you're feeling something in that moment around that. You're happy? That lets off, I feel like, a lot of pressure for kids. I feel like they have to identify good or bad with a feeling. And sometimes even just that's helpful. Let's talk about feeling sad. How often do we let our kids see us sad?
I mean, I hear you saying like there's this importance of not labeling our emotions and digging in with our kids and trusting our gut and not sweeping it under the rug, regardless of what we think the source of this is, right? Or the reason behind it is, whether it's clinical or something else. And I'm still, I think there's probably a lot of parents listening who are saying, I'm doing all that. Like, I'm trying to talk to my kid. I'm trying to be an engaged parent, and one of the things that this CDC report also told us is that at least to some degree, an incredibly high number of parents, I think it was 86% of parents, are monitoring their kids in some way, or at least that's the student's perception, that their parents are asking things like, where are you going? Who are you hanging out with? All of those types of questions. So we've got parents who are trying to be engaged. Kids, depending on the kid, varying levels of, willingness to engage or talk. And sometimes even those parents who are trying to engage may not have the best tools for doing that. That's still on this, like, well, first of all, it's on a micro level, which matters. I'm not saying it doesn't matter.
Right.
For those parents who are like, okay, I'm doing that on the micro level of my family, right? I'm doing that in my family. My kid's still sad. We're still reporting feelings of sadness. And, or also, how do we fix the bigger cultural, societal challenge here, where we're seeing these trends that any parent or professional who reads them goes, right? Like, it causes almost that sharp intake of breath because you go, oh my God, our kids are in trouble. Like, what do we do?
Again, if I had a magic wand, we would be solving all the world problems. So, but a couple things really came to me while you were sharing that, because there are the parents that are doing it all, and they are doing everything they know, and they're doing it right. Like, I just a shout out. I think you and I know a lot of really great parents who are doing it right. and they're doing the best they can, and they're using their tools that they've been taught or that they know. Even those parents can have those kids that are struggling. Even
Yeah.
those parents have those kids that are struggling. I mean, I've been a youth coach for 11 years, and I still am walking the journey as a caregiver for a kid with mental illness. It's like depression, deep, dark depression and sadness and anxiety and all of that. So we can do it right. We can know. My first thing that I always think of, and it tends to be the hardest thing, Christy, and I wish we could normalize this, ask for help. Ask for help.
Yes.
We think we know our kids best, which we do, and we should be able to fix this. Here's what I'm going to tell you. It's not your job to fix it. It is your job to see them for the human that they are and just love the heck out of them. Just love them, love them, love them. When my kiddo was suicidal and he had 3 attempts, I had to finally come to the realization, Christy, that I couldn't love him enough to keep him here.
Yeah.
And that my only job was to just love him exactly where he was in his journey. And once it almost makes me want to cry every time I share that, because
I mean, it makes me tear up too.
how do you say that? Like, my job is to keep him here. It's really not. My job is to love him and let him know he's loved. And I can't choose for him if he decides to stay or leave this world. So we are in a good space, though, just so you know right now.
Yes.
Today
Yes. I know you are. Yes.
Good day. And so asking for help is incredibly, incredibly powerful in the journey of. And it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be help for your kiddo. It might be help for you. To be able to share with somebody your experiences that truly gets it and doesn't judge it, isn't trying to fix it for you. It is supporting it and giving you tools as you need them to be able to come back in a different space, beyond powerful, like moving, life-changing, all of it. So ask for help. Ask for help.
Yeah.
And find who those people are. And if you're listening to this and you're like, that's me, I need people, reach out to Christy, reach out to myself. We have resources. We can help you. We can help you with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say, I think in our culture, we sometimes think of help as a dirty 4-letter word, and it's not. I think it's one of the most powerful words that we can utter. And I also often say, I truly believe we were not meant to parent alone. And I want to zoom out as well in this conversation, because as both a parent and a professional, which I am and you are, there's this hope or like motivating factor, motivating need to also start to shift these trends. And so if we could zoom out for a moment, because you've shared so beautifully, like the messiness of managing this on an individual basis. And I know that you have been in the woods with that, in the thick of that. How do we start to shift these trends? What needs to happen on a bigger, broader scale so that individual families aren't put in the position of having to manage this themselves? Because let's be honest, even those of us in this space who work in this space are not necessarily well equipped to parent children, right? Through this kind of stuff. Like, this is bigger than any one family should ever have to deal with.
And you and I talked about the power of Google and how we like that for so much. But in this conversation, if we go into Google for support or to learn more, you talk about going back into the woods. Like, it's overwhelming, right? So It's not always our best friend. one of my absolute favorite people that I've learned from is a child psychologist, Dr. Jody Carrington. She's out of Canada. She shares something often, Christy, that I like to bring always back into the conversation, because when we do look about how do we start making these changes, like how can we as an individual and as a community and the ripple out, then how can we change these trends? Is she always says, our little people are only doing as well as our big people. And if you think about that, it's not just about our kiddos. Who's taking care of these big people? Who's keeping them and supporting them, seeing them, loving them, and helping them? Because it is a ripple down effect. Look at our teachers. Have you talked to your kids? I know you talk to your kiddos, but have we talked to our kiddos about how our teachers are doing? Oh, they're not afraid to tell you when it's not going well.
Yeah.
And there are some teachers that are really, really struggling from what I hear from our kiddos, and that I know personally too. It's hard for them. So when we look at this from the outside and where we can do something different, I think we can't forget about the big people, including the parents, and how we're taking care of ourselves, because we can only do as well and offer that to our kids as we're taking care of ourselves.
Oh, yes. And, to sort of circle back to the beginning of this conversation, you talked about connection or disconnection as really the root cause, or the umbrella that sort of overshadows or lies over this entire CDC report. And the CDC report focuses on youth in high school.
Yep.
It doesn't look at, and I don't know if the CDC is doing a separate report or sort of where, I'm not privy to what the extent of their research is, but I think it's so critical to mention that I think if you did a report of this nature, we would also see many of these trends mirrored in the adults who are raising kids: disconnection, increased levels of violence, I would suspect, which we saw in the report, increased mental health challenges. We certainly saw an increase in suicidal ideation and attempts and completions during the pandemic. And it's so interesting to have you kind of bring it back to that piece.
I mean, and I have a vision too, Christy, and a dream. And it's just because I'm absolutely so incredibly passionate about the mental health of our youth. And, and it was stated in some of the CDC reporting, even this component about kids in connection with their schools. And we know that's where kids spend the majority of their day, Monday through Friday. It's within that community. My dream and my wish is that it was normal to have mental health education in our education system, that it's not just academics, that there is the structure and the support and the funding, right? It all comes down to funding to support our kids and families, because it's that ripple effect. And I have a vision what that could look like. I mean, there's mental health counselors in the schools. Some of them are sharing, they're spread thin amongst schools. There's not just one full-time counselor per school, and they're spread thin, and they're doing their best they can. And then there's the ripple effect out into the teachers to be supporting these kids on these levels, but they have academic standards and curriculums to stick to. And so they're struggling, and some of them are doing a great job, but where am I to put my energy? And what if we had more within that community structure to support our communities?
Yeah.
And when I love to use the word community, because it's not just the kids, but it's our teachers, it's our educators, it's our families.
Yeah. I mean, that's an incredible vision. I'm thinking about my daughter's school, and there is they have the school counselors, but they are not mental health counselors, right? They are there to help with a wide variety of things, including college admissions and things like that, right? And they have one dedicated mental health counselor who visits the school once a week.
Oh, wow.
Once a week. And then the other days is spread among other schools. And my daughter's school is actually pretty small. But, if you think about some of our local high schools that are 2,000 students, that's not a job for one mental health counselor. That is a Herculean task that nobody should be asking of anyone. And I know that the shortage of mental health support, not just in the schools, but outside of the schools, is a major issue.
Oh, yes, still. It really, I felt it and saw it when COVID shut the schools down, but we're still seeing that. I'm still hearing and talking to families that are like, I'm on a wait list. I can't get my kiddo in for 3 months.
Yeah. I think we could talk about this report for a really long time, right? There's a lot to digest and a lot to think about. And I'm not sure that any of us have perfect answers yet.
No.
This is really, we're just in conversation about this. But I think my takeaway today, Sherra, is it comes back to this space of disconnection, and that we have to put our focus on reconnecting as adults and helping our children feel reconnected with their peers, their teachers, the adults in their lives, their passions, their interests, all their friends, all of those things require some intentional reconnection and a deeper level of connection than maybe we've seen. This report spans 2011 to 2021. In most of these, yes, there was a sharp increase over COVID, but it was already on the way up. Interestingly, the smartphone first released in, I believe it was 2007. And they started tracking this data in 2011. So as that smartphone has made it into the hands of into the hands of kids earlier, and usage has increased, this data tracks with that. And it really comes back to connection.
And we could do a whole nother segment on that. And I just want to share for families and that are really like, okay, I'm in, I want to do this. I really want to center my family around this connection piece, but I don't have the time. Wow. Where am I going to do that? This is what connection looks like. Eye contact, a hand on a shoulder. Hello. It's not about scheduling game night somewhere in the schedule. It's not about going to the movies together as a family. I think it really goes back to the really simple things, like the eye contact, like the putting your phone down to hear about their day. It's things you might already be doing, but with some distraction, in making those intentional moments of connection. So don't make this hard on you. Anybody, none of us have time for that. Not even me, not even Christy. We ain't got time for that. Don't make it hard. Look at what you're already doing and where you could just up level that feeling of connectedness.
I think that is sort of the perfect note to leave this on. I do want to, however, Sherra, give you a chance. Where can people find you? You mentioned, you work with youth, and we talked about the importance of reaching out for help. Where can people find you, and how should they reach out?
So I can be found on my website, which you can go through my name, sherragrasser.com or MePowerment.org. As well as I'm on social media, of course.
The sweet irony.
I don't show up this much, right? although I'm not showing up very much, so you might be disappointed, but I am on Instagram. It's Coach Sherra. And then I also have a Facebook page, which is Sherra Grasser, Youth Empowerment Coach.
And we will make sure all of those are in the show notes so people can track you down. And I will say my daughter works with Sherra and has gotten so much value out of it. The weeks where she's, for whatever reason, not able to see Sherra, she is unhappy about it. Let's just say that. She does not like that.
She even told me, she's like, I was really crabby last week. It's because I didn't see you.
I know. I'm like, thanks, kid.
Yeah. Or thanks, Sherra. What are you doing to my kid?
Right. Oh no, Sherra does amazing work with my kiddo. And I'm so grateful to have you in conversation about this. As I said, I don't think, you and I don't have the magic here, but I think, hopefully we've left parents with some food for thought, a way forward. I do believe there's hope here. I believe there's reason for hope. I think my hope is that this is a kind of a wake-up call for all of us, and that we can use this as a way to sort of climb back up that mountain and get our kids to a healthy space, because they deserve it and we deserve it and we need it. Yeah. Sherra, thank you for being with me today.
Thank you, Christy. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, parents, thank you so much for tuning in and listening today to this episode of the Heartful Parent Podcast. I hope you are walking away with some information, some education, and feeling a bit empowered in how you are talking with and connecting with the youth in your lives, so that we can start to turn these statistics around. As you do that, make sure to subscribe or follow the Heartful Parent Podcast. And hey, if you found this episode helpful, would you do me the favor of forwarding this to another parent who might benefit from hearing this interview and all the others to come? Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week.